This video is being made on October 9th. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email from Google, as well as does this forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward this to you. It is predicted that as of this date, October 9th, well in advance of this year's World Series, the Toronto Blue Jays will not only be in this year's World Series, but that they will win this year's World Series, and specifically in Game 5. Either that and or the Toronto Blue Jays will have a collision involving one or two players in the outfield that will result in a head injury. Okay, so either they will win the World Series in Game 5, or there will be a collision involving Blue Jays players that will result in a head injury. And it is also predicted that they will defeat the Milwaukee Brewers in this year's World Series. And the Milwaukee Brewers haven't even finished their divisional round, let alone they haven't even made it to the semifinals, yet alone the finals yet. Welcome. This video is predicting that the Toronto Blue Jays Major League Baseball team will win this year's World Series in 2025. And not only that, it is predicted that they will play the Milwaukee Brewers in this World Series, and they will win the World Series in Game 5. It will take 5 games. Either this or there will be a prophetic sign, a significant prophetic sign in Game 5, and the Toronto Blue Jays will win in either Game 6 or 7. But I think it will be Game 5. I could be wrong about that. It's like a 50-50 from my understanding of how God's big picture of signs works. And so God is definitely pointing to Game 5, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the day that the Jays will win the World Series. But the prediction is that they will win the World Series, whether it takes 5, 6, or 7 games, and it will be against the Milwaukee Brewers. Now, this email here is documenting this prediction. As you can see, it says here it was written an hour ago, but we can see here the date of this email, time-stamped, is October 9th. Okay, so again, this email is composed on October 9th. As of today, the Toronto Blue Jays haven't yet played Game 1 of the championship series, which is the semifinals in baseball. So in other words, there are 4 series left to be played before we get to the World Series. There are actually more than 4 teams still remaining because 2 of these other series are still ongoing. In other words, we don't yet even know who the Toronto Blue Jays will play in the semifinals. It'll either be Seattle or Detroit. In terms of Milwaukee, they haven't won their series yet. Los Angeles has won their series, but Milwaukee still hasn't won their quarterfinal series. And they are currently playing the Cubs, the Chicago Cubs. And so that's the vantage point. That's where or from where this prediction is being made. All right. So there are 6 teams still left in the playoffs. This is quite the prediction, if we think about it. Now, the skeptic will say, well, the Toronto Blue Jays, fine. They've made it to the semifinals. That's not going to convince a skeptic, an atheist, that the God of Israel is the true God. But that is the purpose of this prediction. And so it's not just that the Toronto Blue Jays will win this World Series, which isn't like astronomical odds, but that they will also play the Milwaukee Brewers, which makes the odds much, much less. But not only that, I am predicting that it will be won, this World Series will be won in Game 5, which makes the odds even far less than that. It's not hard to do the finite math for that. I don't care to do it right at this moment. I just realized that I probably should have, but I haven't. It's not difficult to do that sort of finite math. if you took it in high school. But regardless, we can get the idea here, okay? This is a big deal, this prediction. If it comes to pass that the Jays beat the Brewers in Game 5, it will be quite the prediction. All right, this email and video was composed yesterday, and at the end, or by the end of the recording yesterday, it dawned on me some other things. And the thing that occurred to me is that if the Toronto Blue Jays don't win the World Series on October 29th, 2025, it could very well be the day of a prophetic sign involving one or two Toronto Blue Jays players colliding either with each other or the outfield wall or something, and it resulting in a head injury. Now, the reason for this is because it's all part of the Lord's signs regarding the predicted fall of Paul Simon and him injuring his head on October 31st, 2 days after October 29th, and his predicted collision with the birds. The Blue Jays are types of birds, and this is also part of the trail of signs that's leading to the predicted bird strike plane crash of Gavin Newsom in 2028, after he becomes the presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. Okay, so that's why the collision, but also the head injury that is predicted for October 29th. And like I'm saying, it is either or possibly both. But either the Toronto Blue Jays are predicted to win the World Series on October 29th, or there will be a prophetic collision with these birds, these Blue Jays players, that will result in a head injury. All right, it is also predicted that in this year's World Series, a no-hitter will be pitched. A no-hitter is when the pitcher pitches a complete game without allowing a single hit, which is a rare feat and is always celebrated by the entire team after such an accomplishment. So it's a big deal, and there have only been 2 no-hitters pitched in World Series history. The last one being in 2022. But that's a subject that I'll get into later. Okay, so let's get into what I wrote here. It'll get more interesting as it goes because I was simply writing down the information as it came to me, and as the information builds, it typically gets deeper and more profound. All right, so this email is documenting the prediction that the Toronto Blue Jays will win the 2025 World Series in Game 5. It is predicted that they will play and defeat the Milwaukee Brewers. As of the date of this email, October 9th, 2025, the Toronto Blue Jays have not yet played Game 1 of the American League Championship Series, and the Milwaukee Brewers have not yet defeated the Chicago Cubs in the National League Divisional Series in order to move on to the National League Championship Series. The Cubs-Brewers series that is currently ongoing is tied at 2-2. Game 5 of the 2025 World Series is scheduled to be played on October 29th, 2025, which is 20 days after the current date, October 9th, 2025. So in other words, this prediction is being made 20 days in advance, and a lot of baseball playoffs will happen between now and then. So it is quite the prediction. I'll just emphasize that one more time. It is a significant prediction. In my opinion, it is enough. It will be enough it should be enough to convince the ardent atheist skeptic who, for whatever reason, believes the adult fairy tale that the universe is an accident and it's a product of material atoms colliding with each other, etc. All right. So it was difficult to even say that. The information in this email has been copied and pasted from other emails that were sent on October 8th and October 7th. Okay, so the information here is actually predates a day or two before even October 9th. This link here is to the YouTube Major League Baseball highlights for this prophetic game that occurred on October 7th. Okay, and the highlight of this game between the Toronto Blue Jays and New York Yankees was the home run hit by Aaron Judge of the New York Yankees. This was the big highlight of the game, which was a prophetic sign. It was this game that caught my attention regarding the Toronto Blue Jays, and that's when it was figured out pretty much immediately, shortly after this, or during even watching the highlights, that the Toronto Blue Jays would be the team to win the World Series this year, even though they lost this game. Now, the announcer said during the game, quote, 3 inches, unquote. He actually said this twice. He was referring to Judge's 3-run home run shot, which is symbolic of a mark, the mark of the Antichrist, I should say, because the mark of the Antichrist is the SHOTs, with the Yankees score at 3 at the time of the home run, the 3-run home run. The score was tied, the Yankees had a score of 3, and it was in game 3 of this series. Okay, the 3 inches referred to the goalpost, or rather the foul pole in the outfield. And it's this big yellow pole that stretches from the ground way up into the sky, and it delineates whether a ball is a foul or a home run. If it goes right of the pole or hits the pole, it's a home run. If it goes left of the pole, it's a foul ball. And if you don't know what a foul ball is, then you don't know anything about baseball, I guess. Anyway, the announcer said it was fair, or rather hit the pole by 3 inches. In other words, had it been hit 3 inches to the left, it would have been a foul ball and not a home run. Okay, but it's significant here because it's the 3 inches in the 3-run home run in game 3 when the Yankees were at 3 runs. Okay, now this tied the game in the 4th inning, which hints at for 3 transgressions and for 4, which is a Hebrew idiom that is repeated in the Bible, and it means the tolerable limit of transgressions has been exceeded, and now judgment and destruction for the people or nation is unavoidable. The Yankees' win in Game 3 sent the series into Game 4, which they then lost. The only game they won was the 3rd game in the 4-game series, which is in itself another for 3 transgressions and for 4. And the Paul Simon videos explain how God has used Paul Simon to reveal this Hebrew idiom in the Bible, and Paul Simon is known for being an avid New York Yankees baseball fan. The game tied, the home run tied the game at 6-6, which hints at 3 sixes. The 3-run home run, right, in game 3, 3 inches. It hints at 3 sixes because it tied the game at 6-6, which gives us 3 sixes, which is 666, the number that symbolizes the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. This connected to Donald's triple sabotage in the UN in New York, which is where this baseball game was played. And that was just after Donald Trump and RFK Jr. in a presser that pointed to the first case of autism diagnosed, Donald Triplet. Okay? As I explained in another video, this is all pointing to the coming triple sabotage of the world that's described in the book of Revelation chapter 8. That's why they triple sabotage at the UN on the same day that a solar flare hit the 3rd interstellar object that is currently passing through the solar system. And its timing coincided with this presser about autism, which pointed to the first case of autism, Donald Triplet. The 3 inches referred to the ball hitting the foul pole, which hints at sin, right? And it was because actually even the word sin means to miss the mark. I believe that comes from Greek. In other words, an archer when he's aiming at something. And so that's like a ball being aimed for the outfield and missing the mark by going left of the foul pole. Anyway, when you sin, you're running afoul, if you will, of God. Okay? And the home run was hit by a player named Judge. This is actually his last name. He wears jersey number 99, which is astounding because the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, is the number 9, because from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. And so that's why Judge wears number 9, or rather 99. Incidentally, he broke the record for home runs hit in a season, which was previously held by New York Yankees number 9, who hit 61 home runs in 1961, the year that the Antichrist was born, Barack Obama. 61, by the way, is the 6 plus 6 plus 6th prime number. Okay, tornado rhymes with Toronto. This 3 inches, 3-run shot in Game 3 against Toronto was the day after the National Weather Service upgraded the tornado that killed 3 people. I need to make a video about that. That's a separate thing. It's amazing beyond words. It's extremely important, this tornado and what God communicated through it. But anyway, this game with the 3s was the day after the tornado update, and this game involved Toronto, and we're talking about Game 3, but the tornado killed 3 people. And again, the highlight of the game was the 3-run home run that was 3 inches from the left of the foul pole. The home run was hit against pitcher number 77. 77 equals 7 times 11, which hints at Genesis 7:11, which was the passage in which the flood judgment began, which was a weather event, as was the tornado, which was hinted at with Toronto and player number 77, whom the home run was hit off of. In God's signs, pitchers on the pitching mound symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount in Bible prophecy. This home run was hit on the date 10/7, which symbolizes the Day of Atonement in the Hebrew calendar on the Temple Mount, the 10th day of the 7th month. The home run hit off of pitcher number 77 in New York was 7 plus 7 days after Trumpet's speech at the UN in New York and the triple sabotage on the day that the solar flare hit the 3rd interstellar object, 3 Atlas, which hinted at the coming hit of Earth by a solar flare in God's judgment on the world, hence the UN involvement in this sign, and Trumpet coming against, it's the coming solar flare will be in judgment, God's judgment on the world for coming against Israel and Jerusalem and seeking to divide God's land. The biggest transgression that's described in Bible prophecy for the nations of the world. This home run off player number 7 times 11 was 7 years, 10 months, and 1 day after Trump declared that Jerusalem is Israel's capital city on December 6th, 2017. Okay, that's amazing. Now, to tie this together too, There have been 2 recent stock market signs, and the stock market is in New York City. We had a profound stock market sign on the day that Trump spoke at the UN, in which the intraday high was an all-time record high, and God uses records for signs. The intraday high on that day was a new all-time record, and it was 0.48 points below the 6,700 level. That's because Israel was reborn in 1948, and the other second most important year in modern Israel's history was 67, which was the year of the Six-Day War, when its Arab neighbors sought to destroy and vanquish Israel, annihilate them, a genocide. Speaking of the true genocide, and that was, as a result of the war, Israel expanded its territory and took the Temple Mount. For the first time, Jews controlled the Temple Mount in more than 19 centuries. More than 20 centuries. Okay, anyway. Oh, and what I was saying is that the next stock market sign was another all-time high when the S&P closed at the same number as it made the intraday high on 7 plus 7 days earlier. And again, the day of this second stock market sign that closed at the same number, which was in the 6,700 level, No, I apologize. No, on the 7th and 8th, there were 2 stock market signs that pointed to the same number in the 6,700 level. But the sign on October 7th was also in the 6,700 level, 7 plus 7 days after the S&P reached a new high, 0.48 points beneath the 6,700 level. And it was player number 77, which hints at the 7 plus 7 days between the 2 stock market signs. And again, the stock market is in New York, and this game was played in New York. Okay. Also, on the day that Trump was at the UN, trumpet, I should say, God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs, Trump mentioned how he had ended 7 wars and 7 U.S. bombers had bombed Iran, which also confirmed the 7 plus 7 days in between these 2 stock market signs. But also on the day that the S&P reached 0.48 points below the 6,700 level on the day of the UN, speaking of Israel and its recognition at the UN, Israel was reborn in 48. And on that day that Trump spoke, Macron was the first to declare a Palestinian state, or at least a Western nation to do so. And that infers the 67 borders. So on that day, we had 67 pointed to through Emmanuel Macron. Okay. Now, let's move on here. So, also on the day that the home run was hit off of player number 77, there was a special election in the 7th district, which has 7 plus 7 counties. But that's explained in the other tornado video. The 3 inches 3-run home run in Game 3 with the Yankees at 3 runs was hit off of Toronto, and was the day after the National Weather Service updated the tornado, rhymes with Toronto, that killed 3 people, which was exactly 94 months after Trump declared that Jerusalem is Israel's capital city. 94 is the 33rd semi-prime number, which is a number that is only divisible by 2 other prime numbers, and God uses this for his signs. There was no World Series in 1994, in 94, okay? The World Series prior to 94 was won by the Toronto Blue Jays. There was no World Series in '94 due to a civil war in America's pastime between players and owners, which hints at, symbolic of, the current civil war in America. In '94, Obama turned 33. 94 is the 33rd semi-prime number, and that's relevant because Obama is the big leader of the satanic, antichrist, secular, progressive, godless left in this civil war, which is in reality a spiritual war between right and wrong and righteousness and unrighteousness, etc., between truth and lie. And the big watershed issue of not just our time, but the last 100 years, that is the big lie for the left, is Israel. But where someone comes down on this issue of whose land is it, is the watershed issue that really indicates where they are spiritually in relation to God. And their love of truth, which is contained in the Bible. Because the truth is, the Bible is the Word of God, and there are so many lies. You don't even need to know Bible prophecy to know about the lies regarding this conflict. But the truth is, this conflict cannot be properly understood without a spiritual perspective. Because without the spiritual perspective, you will not appreciate how God's people, the Jews, and the ones that have been grafted into the tree of Israel, Christians, true Christians, are persecuted by Satan. The truth about Islam, which is why this conflict will never end until the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ. But there is an unholy union between an unnatural, unholy union between the left in the West and Islam. And they come together on the issue of Israel, even though they have nothing in common, except their anti-Western, anti-American, anti-Israel agenda, which the truth is, it's spiritually anti-God, the God of the Bible. Let me add that the purpose of this prediction being explained in this video is to prove the things that I am saying. It is to prove the God of Israel. And it is to prove the controversial things that I am saying in this video. And make no mistake, I know far better than anyone, including you, the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. The name of the third interstellar object, 3I Atlas, appears like the number 31. The World Series in 2025 will be 31 years after the year that there was no World Series. The 1994 World Series was a blackout. The third interstellar object was hit by a solar flare. This hints at the coming solar flare that will cause a blackout. And again, the day the never mind. If the Toronto Blue Jays were to win the World Series, it would be their third World Series win, which incidentally isn't an accident in how the number 33 was pointed to in Game 3 of this Toronto Blue Jays series with the Yankees. That's not an accident. This is part of how I clued in that the Toronto Blue Jays would win the World Series this year, making it their third World Series win, their first win since 1993, which just occurred to me just now, hints at the sun that is 93 million miles away from Earth. The following year, after the Toronto Blue Jays' last World Series win, was the blackout year. There was no World Series, which is symbolic of a blackout. The coming solar flare from the sun that is 93 million miles away will cause a catastrophic blackout in America. Wow. Yes, that's it. That's why the Blue Jays will win the World Series. It'll be their third. It'll point back to their last win in 93 and also the blackout that followed that. Astounding. Wow. Wow. Now, let me see. Wow. If the Blue Jays, which are a type of bird, were to win the World Series on October 29th, 2025, Game 5, it would be exactly 144 weeks before Harris and Newsom's predicted plane crash into a baseball stadium due to a bird strike on August 2nd, 2028. The date 8-2 in 28 hints at the number 28. Judge's 3-run home run was possible due to an error on a pop fly that allowed Yankees player number 28 to reach second base. The error was attributed to player number 47. Harris and Newsom are predicted to crash due to a bird strike into a baseball stadium after the predicted funeral for the 47th president. The pop fly that was hit by player number 28 was hit off the bird pitcher, Blue Jays pitcher number 68. Pitchers on the pitching mound symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. The name Barack Obama in simple English gematria is equal to 68. The second player to reach base, who was the second of the three runs in this prophetic 3-run home run, was player number 12. If the Blue Jays win the World Series on October 29th, it will be 12 to the power of 2, as in number 12 reaching the second base runner weeks. In other words, 144 weeks, 12 to the power of 2, before Harris and Newsom's predicted plane crash into a baseball stadium due to a bird strike, which will enable the Antichrist 44th president to return to the White House. That's why this plane crash will happen. In St. Louis, into the baseball stadium in which the Cardinals play, which is also a bird. The final score in this game back to October 7th, 2025 now, the final score was 6-9. This symbolizes the Antichrist on the Temple Mount in Bible prophecy following the 69th week in Daniel chapter 9. This is the most central prophecy in the Bible. And anyway, this period symbolizes the 70th week, or hints at it, which is the period of the end times and the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. Which is why, again, the game's final score was 6-9. Now, 69 is also 3 sets of 23, and God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. The Antichrist wore jersey number 23 in high school basketball, the basketball president. This Blue Jays baseball sign was on the day that the Nashville airport went dark. The headline on Drudge was, "Nashville Goes Dark." It was the main headline, actually, of the day, which confirms that this Jays sign is pointing to the coming bird strike on Harris's and Newsom's airplane. Okay, so it was an airport, right? Not only that, though, Nashville and St. Louis were the two only major cities over which the path of totality of the Great American Eclipse Judgment Warning sign passed over. I'll repeat that. St. Louis and Nashville were the only major cities that the path of the Great American Eclipse Judgment Warning passed over in 2017. So anyway, Nashville is related to St. Louis. They're not far apart, but they are also tied together for this reason, but also the deadliest plane crash in Missouri history was a departure from Nashville that crashed in St. Louis. That's another story, but that plane crash also is confirmation. It's what confirmed for me back in late 2022 that Kamala Harris's plane crash, which I had known about since late 2020, would be in St. Louis. Okay, that plane crash in the 1970s. I forget the details of the connection. But basically it was 18,000 days exactly before November 3rd. And speaking of baseball, that was a baseball sign. November 3rd, 2022 ended up being a baseball sign, but it all pointed to everything I'm talking about. And anyway, that's when it was first learned. But because of the plane, the long story short here is that the plane departed from Nashville and went to St. Louis, which is the path of totality of the eclipse, which is why that plane departed from Nashville and went to St. Louis. It points to the eclipse, which is why Kamala Harris will crash in St. Louis, because the eclipse peaked over St. Louis at 1:17 p.m. That's where the eclipse started peaking. All right. Now, anyway, there's lots to that. That's a whole other story that was explained years ago, and I don't know if you'll ever find that video, and maybe we'll repost it at some point. So, but it's so huge. So the information in that video I'm talking about is so huge. I forget what it's titled. Anyway, the fourth of these Gaza wars killed supposedly 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 Arab Muslims in Gaza. Because of course you can never trust the numbers from the so-called Palestinians. The war crisis began on May 7th, 2021, when Arab Muslims rioted at the Damascus Gate and stormed the Temple Mount and took control of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Okay, so May 7th, 2021 was the beginning of the fourth of the Gaza wars. 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 people, in other words, 4 to the power of 4 people got killed. It was the fourth Gaza war. All this points to the 44th president, who is the Antichrist, who is described to be on Temple Mount in Bible prophecy, which is why this crisis began, this war began due to a dispute over East Jerusalem and the Temple Mount. Okay, the rioters took refuge in the Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount on this date, for example. Now, pictures on the pitching mound in God's signs symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount in Bible prophecy. On May 7th, 2021, the day of this Temple Mount sign, picture number 22, and number 22 symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist, because the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist described in the book of Ezekiel would have been a Tav mark, and the Tav letter is the last and 22nd letter in the Hebrew alphabet, and the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last and 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. And also the mark of the Antichrist alters a person's chromosomes, and chromosomes, each chromosome has 2 arms, and they come in pairs, 2 and 2. Okay, so the pitcher on the pitching mound, which symbolizes the Antichrist on the Temple Mount, wore jersey number 22, and he was for the Cincinnati Reds, and on this day he threw a no-hitter against the Cleveland Indians. Both of these teams represent cities in the 17th state. The signs on the anniversary of the beginning of the current Gaza war that pointed to the Temple Mount on 10/7/2025. Okay, this is a typo. Now, it's exactly 4 times 4th prime number of months after this. Beginning of the 4th Gaza war, when 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 Arab Muslims were killed. All right. Okay. The 44th president is the Antichrist, who will be on the Temple Mount, and he left office in the year 17, which is why the 17's here in the baseball sign. The 4th Gaza war began over the issue of the evictions of 6 Arab Muslims from their apartments in East Jerusalem. Player number 22 pitched a no-hitter from the pitching mound, and on this night, he wore a temporary tattoo of the Incredible Hulk that his young son had put on him that day. He said it was good luck. His jersey number 22 is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, as was the tattoo of the Incredible Hulk. This is incredible. The Incredible Hulk is a character whose genes are altered, which is what the mark of the Antichrist does to people. And of course, the tattoo on his skin is symbolic of a mark. So he's marked with a tattoo that symbolizes altering genes. He wears DNA, and he wears number 22, which is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, and he pitched from the pitching mound a no-hitter, which is why the tattoo was supposedly good luck, which is also superstition, which makes it satanic. And pitchers on the pitching mound symbolize the Antichrist and the Temple Mount. And on this day was the beginning of the Temple Mount War, the Fourth Gaza War that killed 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 Arab Muslims. This is amazing. And again, I just explained how it connects with the 4th times 4th prime number of months, 53 months, to October 7th, 2025, and the signs on that date that contained or were about the Temple Mount, including the player number 77 on the pitching mound, another baseball sign. Now, I think I do explain this later, but this baseball sign here, maybe I don't explain it later. This May 7th, 2021, in which was the beginning of the 4th Gaza War and that killed 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 Arab Muslims. That was 4 times 4th prime number of months before October 7th, 2025. Okay, this May 7th, 2021 date was exactly 40 months after the prophetic Mars-Jupiter conjunction in the night sky, Mars being symbolic of war. This conjunction was pointed to ahead of time through the Revelation chapter 12 sign in 2017. The conjunction was on January 7th, 2018. Just prior to that was the Revelation chapter 12 sign in September. And that depicted the passage in the Bible, chapter 12 of Revelation, that describes the dragon pursuing the woman, which is symbolic of Israel. The Gaza War, the current one, began exactly 69 months after this Jupiter-Venus conjunction. And again, Mars is symbolic of war. And Jupiter's central in the Revelation chapter 12 sign, which is part of the Revelation chapter 12, which is basically the baby. Jupiter symbolizes the child that's birthed from the mother, and the woman in the passage is symbolic of Israel. Anyway, and again, 69 months, because this hints at the most central prophecy in the Bible that I explained earlier, the 69 weeks, which hints at the 70th week and the period of the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. And the current Gaza War also started over an issue regarding the Temple Mount. That was the supposed justification for Hamas to do what they did on October 7th, 2023, which was 69 months exactly after the Mars-Jupiter sign. See, it's all amazing. It's all orchestrated by God. It's all a story God is telling. Speaking of stories, this was an amazing story again with the Incredible Hulk tattoo on the pitching mound. Stunning. Yeah. I think this might have been the 4th no-hitter of the season. Let me just check. Well, of course it was. Of course it was. Didn't even need to check. It was the 4th no-hitter of the season. It was the day of the beginning of the 4th Gaza War that killed 4 times 4 times 4 times 4 Arab Muslims, exactly 4 times 4th prime number of months before October 7th, 2025. and Judge's home run that sent the series into Game 4, which is what the announcer said after the game. Anyway, it's a wow. It's a wow. And it was 40 months exactly after the Mars-Jupiter conjunction. The prophetic Toronto Blue Jays and New York Yankees baseball game on October 7th, 2025 was followed up with Game 4 the following day on October 8th, 2025. This was the day that trumpeted that Israel and Hamas had agreed to the first phase of his peace plan. The first phase is focused on the return of the 48 hostages. On that day, Trump spoke at the UN and about ending 7 wars and using 7 U.S. bombers in the Middle East. And on this day, the S&P 500 index made an all-time record intraday high, 0.48 points below the 6,700 level, which hinted at Israel's 2 most important years in its modern history, 1948 and 67. The stock market sign that involved 0.48 points on the day that Trump's speech about ending 7 wars and using 7 U.S. bombers in the Middle East was 7 plus 7 days before the signs regarding the Temple Mount on 10/7 and the election for the 7th District for 7 plus 7 counties that day, which was the day before trumpeted that his peace plan involving 48 hostages had been agreed to. Okay, so you see how this 0.48 points connected to Trump's 48 hostages peace plan through, for example, the baseball sign. Okay, which was in New York, which is where the UN is, which is where Trump spoke on the day of the 0.48 points, because Israel, the UN, 48 in 1967, right? Okay. The reason, and also ending wars, and that's what happened 7 plus 7 days later with the peace plan. Okay, at the UN, he said he ended 7 wars, okay, and 7 U.S. bombers in the Middle East, which was 7 plus 7 days before the end of the peace, before the end of the war. Okay, so the reason this is relevant to the Toronto Blue Jays game on October 7th, 2025, is that it is predicted that on October 29th, 2025, the Toronto Blue Jays will win their first World Series in 4 times 8 years, which hints at 48. October 29th, 2025 will be Game 5. The Blue Jays sign on October 7th was on the day that the stock market pointed to Slaughterhouse 5 and the 5th Gaza War. Okay, because on this day, the day after was the end of the 5th Gaza War, but it was the anniversary of the 5th Gaza War. And I didn't explain it. I didn't, because it's in another video. October 7th, the intraday high on October 7th, which was a prophetic sign, was a new record all-time high. God uses records at 6,754 points, 6,754 points. And when we subtract that number of days from this date, we get April 11th, 2007, the day that Kurt Vonnegut died, the famous American author who authored Slaughterhouse 5, which is why the anniversary of the 5th, and basically the end of the 5th Gaza War, connected to the book Slaughterhouse 5, which is about war and being anti-war. It's about anti-war. The Blue Jays' colors are blue and white, which are the colors that symbolize Israel. It could be that the 48 hostages will be released on the day that it is predicted that the Blue Jays will win the World Series on October 29th. However, it is now a couple of days after I wrote this, and it seems that the hostages will be released in a couple of days. And so this isn't true anymore. The name World Series also hints at judgment on the nations of the world for coming against Israel and Jerusalem and seeking to divide God's land. October 29th, 2025 will be exactly 69 months, which is at the 69 weeks in Daniel chapter 9, after January 29th, 2020, when strong winds knocked over a section of Trumpet's border wall of security. Okay, so Trumpet's border wall of security, because in the book of Joshua led the Israelites around the walls of security of Jericho, and then they blew trumpets, and then the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. And so that's why Trump's presidency and election campaign, the first ones, were synonymous with his border wall of security. And here we had this prophetic sign in which a section of Trumpet's border wall of security was blown over by winds, an act of God. And that was the day after trumpeted, as in the trumpets that were trumpeted at Jericho when the walls of security collapsed. It was the day after Trump's wall collapsed, the day after, by wind, and wind is what's blown through a trumpet. It was the day after his Abraham Accords, which is a peace deal thing. Abraham Accords, and the quote-unquote deal of the century for Israel and the Arab Muslims living in the West Bank and Gaza. Okay, there's no such thing as a Palestinian people. So this January 29th, 2020 date, right, was 69 months exactly before this upcoming predicted Blue Jays win, and blue and white hints at Israel. Well, January 29th, 2020 was exactly 180 plus 80, which hints at 188, a number that God uses frequently in his signs to point to H188 in the Hebrew concordance, which is the word that means woe, exclamation mark, which is used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. Okay, this Abraham Accords was announced, and then just following that, hours later, the wall of security collapsed on January 29th, and it was 180 plus 80 months exactly after the UN partition plan for Palestine on November 29th, 1947. That's a whoa. The question is, well, is Trump the Antichrist that will divide God's land? Well, no. So this all leads to October 7th, and then the following day, which is the announcement that the peace plan is going through in Gaza, and the day after that, Trump trumpeted criticism for Obama receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. It was on the 4 times 4 year anniversary of the 44th president getting awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The 4 times 4th anniversary of the 44th president getting the Nobel Peace Prize. First Thessalonians 5:3, for they will be saying peace and security, and then sudden destruction will come upon them like birth pains, essentially is what it says. Speaking of the Antichrist. Okay, so, and that's a woe. And so the UN partition plan, the big symbolic attempt to divide Israel, which the Arab Muslims, by the way, rejected and the Jews accepted, this plan to divide Israel, on November 29th, 1947, was 146% of a year. And it really is, because it's 0.03%. So 146% of a year after the birth of Trump on the date 6/14 in 1946. The date 6/14 is 14/6 outside the US, including in Israel. And the date 4/16 confirms the 146% of a year connection. The birth of Trumpet connects to the UN partition plan for Palestine. Which connects to Trumpet's wall falling, which connects to October 7th and Trump's Gaza peace plan, and Obama's Nobel Peace Prize through Trump's criticism of it on the day that Trump announced that the 48 hostages would be released in a couple of days, October 9th. In other words, the UN partition plan for Palestine connects to Trumpet's current Gaza peace plan. Trumpet's wall collapsed on January 29th, 2020, exactly 68 months before Trump trumpeted his current Gaza peace plan on September 29th, 2025. Barack Obama is the Antichrist who will lead the world in attempting to divide Israel, and the name Barack Obama is equal to 68 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, and that's why Trump's wall collapsed exactly 68 months before Trump trumpeted his current peace plan on September 29th. Which, by the way, was exactly 77 years and 10 months after the UN partition plan. Which, since that's 77 times 10, which is 770, which is 7 times 110, and Joshua died at the age of 110 after he led the Israelites around the walls of security of Jericho 7 times, before they then blew 7 trumpets, after marching around 7 times on the 7th day. Once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day, 7 times on the 7th day, and then 7 trumpets. And he died at 110, so that's why 770, extremely prophetic, and that's why Trump's peace plan for Gaza connected with essentially 7 times 110 to the UN partition plan for Palestine. It's absolutely astounding beyond words. Trump is trumpeting through God, or God through Trump is trumpeting the Antichrist and the world dividing Israel, for which the world will be judged and destroyed. Now, okay. It is also predicted that the team that the Toronto Blue Jays will play in this year's World Series will be the Milwaukee Brewers. It is predicted that the Toronto Blue Jays will beat the Milwaukee Brewers in the World Series on October 29th, 2025. The predicted Blue Jays win on October 29th, 2025 will be 22 days after the signs that pointed to the Temple Mount on October 7th, 2025, which was also the day of the prophetic Blue Jays game, which was the 2-year anniversary of the Gaza War. The Blue Jays were the last team to win the World Series 2 years in a row. Pitchers on the pitching mound symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. This year's season was known for not having any no-hitters. This season's, like I said earlier, and the last time was in 2022. This year's season was 2 + 2 years after the year of the record number of no-hitters in a season. So it's a contrast between the record number and 0 no-hitters, 2 + 2 years apart. Okay, and that year it was 9 no-hitters in a season. That was the record number. The record 9th no-hitter was pitched on 9/11 by 2 Milwaukee Brewers pitchers. It was the Brewers franchise second no-hitter in history. And it was on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. The jersey numbers of these 2 pitchers who pitched the no-hitter on 9/11 summed to 110. It was player number 39 and 71 for a total of 110 between the 2 pitchers. On 9/11, 2 planes struck 2 towers that were each 110 stories. On this same 9/11 day, the Toronto Blue Jays played 2 games in one day, and in each game they scored 11 runs for a total of 22 runs on this 9/11 20th anniversary day. These 2 games with 11 runs scored in each game on the date 9/11 hinted at how 20 years earlier 2 planes struck 2 towers that were 110 stories. The 11 runs in each game, the 2 games hints at the 2 towers that were 110 stories for a total of 220 stories that collapsed, and it was a total of 22 runs on the 20th anniversary with the Blue Jays. The Jays' 2 games with 11 runs each hinted at the following day after Toronto scored 11 runs in each of the 2 games for a total of 22 runs. They scored another 22 runs in their game. So that sentence was not written well. So on 9/11, they had 2 games, and in each game they scored 11 runs for a total of 22 runs. And then the day after, in their game, they scored another 22 runs in one game. Now, the day after that was a Monday, and the stock market index closed at 20,666 points. Their game on 9/11, in which they scored 22 runs in 2 games on the 20th anniversary of 9/11, hence the 20,000 number in the 20,666 closing number in the Toronto Stock Exchange. Because removing that gives us the 666. Pitchers on the pitching mound symbolize the Antichrist on the Temple Mount, 666, the number of the Antichrist. The Blue Jays' 2 games were on the same day that 2 pitchers for the Milwaukee Brewers pitched the second no-hitter in Brewers history while wearing a number 44 patch on their sleeves. The 44th president will be on the Temple Mount as the Antichrist in his second presidency, just prior to the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, who will vanquish the Antichrist from the Temple Mount during his second presidency. The predicted World Series matchup this year between the Toronto Blue Jays and the Milwaukee Brewers will point to these 2 teams' games 2+2 seasons prior on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So you see that? The matchup in this World Series is going to point to this 9/11 day that involved the Milwaukee Brewers and the Toronto Blue Jays. Involved 2, the 2 games and the 22 runs, and then the 2 pitchers that pitched the second no-hitter in Brewers history 2+2 years before they're predicted to be in the World Series playing each other. That's why I know that the Blue Jays will play the Milwaukee Brewers in this year's World Series. There's a 2% chance that the Brewers will win and the Blue Jays will lose, and that I have it wrong, but I don't think so because of everything else that I've explained. No, I really don't think. I mean, that's not even a 2% chance. Maybe a 0.2% chance. But whatever. I'm not a crystal ball. I'm just going from God's signs, right? I know because these 2 teams are in the playoffs, and God just pointed to one of them through the Yankees game, and I know this year was the year of no-hitters, which contrasts with the year of record no-hitters, and the record one, the 9th one, was pitched by the Milwaukee Brewers on the day of the prophetic Blue Jays day, as I just explained in this paragraph. And that was 2+2 years ago. It's definitely going to happen. The Blue Jays are going to play the Milwaukee Brewers in the World Series, and they're going to win. It's amazing, and this is being predicted well ahead of time. If you made it this far into the video, when the prediction comes to pass, you will now know that this isn't fluke when the prediction comes to pass. If you were a skeptic, irrational atheist, because it is irrational, because you really don't want there to be a God, but if you were one of those people, or if you're one of the greater number of people, the majority of people in the West today, who will say, yes, I believe in a God, but not like the God of the Bible. He's more like an energy. He is the universe itself, and we are part of this collective consciousness, and we are part of God. In other words, the Indian religion has replaced Christianity and monotheism in the West. If you are a pantheist, which is what that is called, which is also irrational, make no mistake, I've just now explained to you the reasons for how I know this is going to happen. It means it won't be a fluke. It will prove the God of Israel, the righteous Christian God of the Bible, not the pantheistic collective consciousness, universal energy, the universe itself God. The word holy is Hebrew, And it means separate from. God is not the creation. He is the creator of the creation. He isn't the universe itself. He preceded the universe. We even have the Big Bang that disproves Indian religion and pantheism. The universe had a beginning, which completely disproves all of Eastern philosophy, which the New Agers and the people into Eastern religion don't even know. Okay? This will be proven anyway when the prediction comes to pass. The Eastern philosophy, the Eastern religion, God is the universe itself, is from Satan. You are not in good standing with God. You might think so. You may even have intervention of God happen in your life. Probably not, though. Probably it is the devil disguised as God, but there is such a thing as common grace. People that are not in the family of God, that have not been adopted into God's family, because people are not all children of God. That's false. But people that are not part of God's family, like I just said, can have God's common grace. It's different than saving grace. So don't think because God did something for you in your life that you are in good standing with God. The only way is through, like Jesus said, Him. He is the door and the gate to life. It is through His conquering of death that He has defeated Satan's power over us. And until you accept that, you are with Satan. Even if you think you are with God, this collective universal energy God, whatever. That's the point of this video. Do you understand? That's why I'm making this video and this prediction. Otherwise, this would be a waste of time. It's not for the purpose of going, hey, cool, neat. You were able to know ahead of time that the Blue Jays would win the World Series. That's not the point. If you are listening to what I'm saying, this is proving the God of the Bible, the God of Israel, the God of the Jews. And true Christians are Jews, spiritually. All right, did we finish this paragraph? I think we did. Yeah, because the Milwaukee Brewers were wearing the patch 44 on their sleeves during this record no-hitter, and pitchers on the pitching mound symbolized the Antichrist, the 44th president. Which, by the way, will be 4 years before this year's World Series. That's another thing, but I believe I mentioned that in an upcoming paragraph here. It isn't just 2 + 2 years from the two pitchers that pitched the second Milwaukee Brewers no-hitter. It's 4 years from when they were wearing number 44 patch on their sleeves. And why were they doing that? Because player number 44, Hank Aaron, died that year, and he played on 2 teams. One of them was the Milwaukee Brewers. And furthermore, he played for the Milwaukee Braves before they moved to Atlanta. And he died 9 months and 11 days before the Atlanta Braves won the World Series. And I mentioned this in this next paragraph, so I'm not going to get ahead of myself here, okay? So let's just continue on here. But he also died, I don't think I mentioned in this paragraph, he died exactly, number 440, well, it's really just getting off subject. But he died exactly, number 44 died exactly 444 weeks after the movie massacre, which was 42 months exactly after Barack Obama was inaugurated. The Dark Knight rose on the inauguration, and then 42 months, which is the number of months that's symbolic of the period of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. Later was the massacre in the movie theater, in which involved shots and shootings and things that come out of guns and go into people are symbolic of the things that go into people, and the mass shootings are symbolic of the mass thing, the SHOTs that have killed masses of people. And anyway, that slaughter in the movie theater was exactly 444 weeks before the date, January 22nd, 2021, which I knew ahead of time to be an important date God was pointing to because of that connection. And then lo and behold, on that day, number 44 died. And how did he die? Because 6 + 6 days earlier, he took the mark. I just jumped ahead of myself. No. The predicted Blue Jays win over the Milwaukee Brewers will be 2 + 2 years after the Atlanta Braves won the World Series on the date 11/2, which instead 11 times 2 equals 22, which was the day that the CDC in Atlanta recommended the thing for 5-year-olds. And by the way, I forgot to mention in this paragraph, the final prophetic out of the game, and God uses final outs of games, especially the World Series, for prophetic signs, and the final out was made by first baseman named Freeman, who wears jersey number 5, and that was the day that the thing, the mark of the Antichrist, was approved for 5-year-olds. The horrendous abomination that was foisted onto kids, which broke the social contract when the baby boomers, in their mass hysteria and cult-like behavior, decided that for the first time, they would sacrifice the young generation for the sake of the old, believing, because it was well known that the disease didn't affect young people, but it spread it, I suppose they were thinking, and so, well, we need to get them the thing. And the abomination was given to them. Anyway, it was one of the most unrighteous things in history. And this was pointed to on this day that the Braves won the World Series, which, as I'll explain in a second, pointed to Hank Aaron, number 44. So, 22 days before the Jays' predicted win in Game 5, the S&P 500 pointed to Slaughterhouse 5, as I explained earlier. The Atlanta Braves won the 117th World Series. The phrase, "let it divide," in Hebrew from Genesis chapter 1 is equal to 117 in Hebrew gematria. The middle dividing chapter of the Bible is Psalms 117. The dividing year of the Roman Empire, when it reached maximum expansion, was 117 AD. The eclipse divided the nation and peaked in the middle of the eclipse over St. Louis at 1:17 p.m. So the number 117 is symbolic of divide. The mark of the Antichrist is divisive. And the Antichrist was inaugurated in 2009, exactly 117 months after the mass shooting, also in Colorado, the Four Corners state that has 4 corners, and killed 4 times 4 people, the Columbine massacre. So the inauguration connected, as I just explained now, to the movie theater massacre in Colorado, the 4 corner state that has 4 corners, and with the number that symbolizes divide, to the first of the mass shootings, the Columbine massacre, with 117 months, because the mark of the Antichrist is divisive and was meant to be by God's design. Now, the mark of the Antichrist thing divides people. 9 months and 11 days, which hints at Revelation 9:11, which is the verse that symbolizes how those who take the mark of the Antichrist will become demonically possessed. Before the Atlanta Braves won the 117th World Series, former Atlanta Braves Hank Aaron died after he took the mark of the Antichrist in front of the public at the CDC in Atlanta. So in other words, the winning game in which pointed to the CDC in Atlanta, when player number 5 made the final out on the day that the CDC approved the thing for 5-year-olds and recommended it. 9 months and 11 days earlier, I should say, Hank Aaron died 6 + 6 + 6 days after he took the thing publicly at the CDC in Atlanta. He died 6 + 6 + 6 days after he took the mark of the thing, and it was the first day of the 117th Congress, which was 117 days after his 2 former teams, the Atlanta Braves and Milwaukee Brewers, each scored 29 and 19 runs respectively in their games, which is an enormous amount of runs to score in a game. And both of them were in the news because of it. On the same day, these just happened to be the 2 Hank Aaron teams, 117 days before the 117th Congress, when he took the thing, 6 + 6 + 6 days before he died from the thing, which was 9 months and 11 days, Revelation 9:11, before the Atlanta Braves won the 117th World Series. In 2021, the Milwaukee Brewers players wore number 44 patch on their sleeves in honor of the player number 44, Hank Aaron. The Milwaukee Brewers wore number 44 on their sleeves, and the Atlanta Braves won the World Series while honoring player number 44, with a big 44 in the outfield during the World Series on the grass. 4 years before, it is predicted the Milwaukee Brewers will be in the World Series this year. This makes the Milwaukee Brewers symbolism for the 44th president, Antichrist, on the Temple Mount. The Antichrist will persecute God's people in Israel and will be on the Temple Mount. God's people will be victorious. The team wearing the blue and white is predicted to beat the team that symbolizes the 44th president. Okay, so the Milwaukee Brewers symbolize the 44th president on the Temple Mount. That's why they pitched the no-hitter on the Temple Mount, the record one on the day of the Blue Jays sign in 2021, 4 years before this year's World Series, when it is predicted that the blue and white team, the Blue Jays, will beat the team that symbolizes the 44th president. In Bible prophecy, the victory of God's saints over the enemy is symbolized by the number 144. The Blue Jays' predicted victory over Milwaukee on October 29, 2025, will be exactly 144 weeks before it is predicted that the Democratic Party presidential nominee, Gavin Newsom, will die in a plane crash into the Major League Baseball stadium in St. Louis due to a bird strike, hence Blue Jays, on August 2nd, 2028, which will pave the way for the return of the 44th president to the White House and on top of the Temple Mount. The predicted plane crash on August 2nd, 2028, which is 2/8/28 outside of the US, will be exactly 4 times 40 weeks after the storm over the 28th state on July 3rd, 2025, which caused the record, the catastrophic flooding, if you recall, the following morning. But the storm began on this day, the day before July 4th. Which was exactly 28 days, 2,828 days, after Trumpet declared to the media that the gathering of military officials at the White House was the quote-unquote quiet before the storm. You recall Trump saying that cryptically to the media? That was 28 days before the storm in the 28th state, which is 4 times 40 weeks exactly to the predicted plane crash on the date 2/8/28 outside the US, which means that prior to 8/2/28 is the quiet before the storm and the return of the Antichrist to the White House. The plane crash is predicted to be 7 days after it is predicted that President Trump will be ASS-inated, and Newsom will be on his way back to California after the predicted funeral in Washington. The predicted Milwaukee Brewers loss on October 29th, 2025 will be exactly 66 weeks and 6 days after Trump accepted the Republican Party nomination at the convention in Milwaukee. At the time of Trump's predicted death on July 26th, 2028, it is predicted that he will be running for president for a 5th time. He previously ran in 2000, 2016, 2020, and 2024. Milwaukee is predicted to lose the series in Game 5, okay? This is quite something. So the president's acceptance speech for the nomination was in Milwaukee. And this year it is predicted that Milwaukee will lose the World Series. And it's predicted that they will lose the World Series in Game 5, 66 weeks and 6 days after Trump did the nomination thing in Milwaukee. Okay? Trump ran for president 5 times, and it's predicted that Milwaukee will lose in Game 5. Now, one thing, the Milwaukee acceptance speech for the nomination was 7 days. Now get this. So in the Bible, when a priest is consecrated, when a leader of the people is made holy by God for his purposes, anointed by God, they put the blood on the priest's right ear and then the priest's hand, but first the thumb, the right thumb, which is what happened when Trump, in the assassination attempt of Trump. He got his ear got grazed by the grace of God, which caused there to be blood, and then he immediately put his hand up to his ear, but his right thumb touched his hand first, touched the blood first. And then the blood is to go onto the feet, which is why Trump's shoes fell off and blood got on his feet. And then they are to be holy or sanctified for 7 days. Well, in the Hebrew calendar, the day begins at sunset. So on the 13th was 1 day, then the 14th, 15th, 3 days, 16th, 4 days, 17th, 5 days, and then 18th, 6 days, but then he gave the speech in the night on the 18th, which was the 7th day. How's them apples? Okay, so that day is extremely prophetic. Now I've established that. That day is 66 weeks and 6 days, and it was in Milwaukee, and it's 66 weeks and 6 days before it's predicted that Milwaukee will lose the World Series. Now, I could be wrong. Like I said, maybe there's a 0.2% chance that Milwaukee will win and the Blue Jays will lose. But you get my point. This October 29th is going to involve the Milwaukee Brewers because of Milwaukee. It is predicted that Gavin Newsom's plane crash will be the result of a bird strike. It is predicted that this bird strike will be exactly 144 weeks after the Blue Jays, which are birds, win the World Series. 2 + 2 years before the Blue Jays' predicted World Series win, the Blue Jays scored 11 runs in each of their 2 games on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 for a total of 22 runs. These 2 games with 11 runs each hinted at the collapse of 2 towers by 2 planes with 110 stories each, for a total of 220 stories. On the same day of these 2 games in which 11 runs were scored for a total of 22 runs, 2 Milwaukee Brewers pitchers on the pitching mound pitched the Brewers' second no-hitter for the Major League Baseball's record 9th no-hitter of the season. The jersey numbers of the 2 pitchers of the record 9th no-hitter of the season on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 summed to 110. Again, on 9/11, the 110 stories collapsed. The 9th no-hitter and the jersey numbers that summed to 110 hinted at 9/11, when 110 stories collapsed. Pitchers on the pitching mound symbolized the Antichrist on the Temple Mount. Exactly 110 weeks prior to the pitchers whose jersey numbers summed to 110, no-hitter on 9/11/2021 was the birthday of the Antichrist, 44th president, on August 4th, 2019. And again, pitchers on the pitching mound symbolized the Antichrist on the Temple Mount, the 44th president. Well, on this birthday, the 44th president's birthday, 4 people died in a blackout in Jakarta, Indonesia, where the 44th president grew up for 4 years. On this August 4th, 2019 date, the Toronto Blue Jays played the Baltimore Orioles and scored a total of 11 runs, which confirmed the exact 110 weeks connection to when the Blue Jays scored 11 runs in each of their 2 games for a total of 22 runs. The Blue Jays and Orioles are both types of birds. The 44th president is predicted to become the president again through a bird strike plane crash. The number 31 is the 11th prime number. August 4th, 2019 was exactly 110, which is at 11 weeks after the Blue Jays, or I should say before the Blue Jays, played 2 games in which they scored 11 runs, and the Brewers pitchers' numbers summed to 110. Okay, so again, on August 4th, 2019, the score in the game added up to 11, and it was 110 weeks before the Blue Jays scored 2 games of 11 runs each, and the Brewers' jersey numbers added up to 110, which hints at 11. So you got a bunch of 11s there, okay? Colliding or converging on August 4th, 2019. Now, August 4th, 2019 was exactly 36 years, and 36 hints at 666 because it is 6 times 6, but also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And also, the 36th triangular number is 666. A triangular number being the last number in the 36th row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. Okay, so the Antichrist's birth date, because 666 is the number of the Antichrist, in 2019 was exactly 36 as in 666 years after player number 31, which is the 11th prime number. And again, I just explained how his birthday converged or was pointed to at the number 11. Okay, so his birthday, the Antichrist's birthday, was exactly 666 years after player number 31, the 11th prime number, for the Yankees at the age of 31, which is the 11th prime number, killed a seagull bird that he threw a baseball at while he was playing the Toronto Blue Jays in Toronto. The seagull is protected in Toronto, and Dave Winfield was arrested. It became an international scandal, a fiasco, because this Major League Baseball player, an American, was arrested in Canada for killing a bird with a bird strike. But he was 31 and he wore number 31, the 11th prime number. Well, number 31, the 11th prime number, would join the Blue Jays team 9 years later, as in the record 9 no-hitters, and bat in an RBI, run batted in, the 2 winning runs in the series winning game for the Blue Jays' first World Series win. It was also Dave Winfield's only World Series win. Okay, and in that World Series, he wore jersey number 32. The Jays would win 2 World Series in a row, the second one being 32 years before their predicted World Series win this year. This is amazing. This is also very personal for me. The reason why I know this is because God designed my life for what I am doing right now and this video. And this is a part of my childhood. I grew up in Toronto, a big Blue Jays fan, and I remember this. This is the reason why this occurred to me. Once, well, it was the Holy Spirit that inspired it in my mind, but it occurred to me, I think if I recall, in the middle of the night while I was dreaming one night, but I just remembered the bird strike of Dave Winfield, because I had at that time been learning that God was saying that the president would become the president again through a plane crash bird strike. And so what about the Blue Jays bird strike of Dave Winfield? Because God uses these sports signs like you wouldn't believe, unless you're following. Okay? And so yeah, this is it. Because the bird strike was on the Antichrist's birthday. And that's not a coincidence, obviously, right? And how does it connect to the big picture? Well, like I said, the bird strike by player number 31, who was 31 years old, 11th prime number, connected with the number 666 to the day that the Blue Jays and the Orioles scored 11 runs, which was 110 weeks before the 9th record no-hitter with 2 players for the Brewers' second, on and on, right? Like I explained. And the Jays scored 2 games and 11 runs each. And the jersey numbers added up to 110. And so that gets us to 9/11, 2021, which is 4 + 4 years before this predicted World Series between these two teams. 2 + 2 years, or 4 years. 4 years because they were wearing patch number 44 on their sleeve. So I've explained it all now. So you get it here. The bird strike, and then again, like I'm saying, the Blue Jays win is predicted to be 144 weeks exactly to the bird strike of the plane that will enable the 44th president to become the Antichrist again. And that's why the first bird strike here with Dave Winfield was on the Antichrist's birthday. It all goes back to 1983 on the Antichrist's birthday, which, by the way, was the Antichrist's 11 + 11th birthday. I forgot to add that into the paragraph. It was the 22nd birthday of the Antichrist. That's why it connects to the 22 runs by the Blue Jays. In that day when they scored 11 runs in each game, and then the following day they scored 22 runs in their game, right? It all connects to Dave Winfield, who threw the bird strike at a bird in the Blue Jays stadium 22 years, or 11 + 11 years after the birthday of the Antichrist. It's so amazing. And it's all, I'll just say that again. The birth of the Antichrist connects through Dave Winfield's bird strike to the predicted bird strike of the plane that will enable the 44th president to become the president again. Because the Blue Jays are predicted, which are a bird, are predicted to win 144 weeks before the predicted bird strike. Okay? Now, if you're the skeptic, the irrational person that believes that the universe is nothing but material, and you don't believe, for some reason, after this prediction comes to pass, you don't change, you don't get on your knees and start crying like you should, and asking for God's forgiveness for rejecting him and not looking into the evidence, because now you're going to start looking into the evidence, finally, and realize it's overwhelming. But because you were so not wanting there to be a God, you didn't bother looking into any of the evidence. Well, okay, if that's the case after this prediction still, well, I guess you'll just have to wait to the bird strike, plane crash, on August 2nd, 2028. I wish you luck. I wish you luck making it that far. You'll also, if you do, and your mind is still intact, because the more you stay with Satan, the more corrupted your mind will become, and the more difficult it will be for you, because your mind gets corrupted with the lies, which is why it's so difficult for people that have consistently chosen to believe lies over their lifetime, have built up a structure, scaffolding, skyscraper tower of lies that needs to be just torn apart and started afresh. Their whole worldview is built on stuff, on lies, which is built on another lie, which is built on another lie, because they continue to choose to believe the lies. And so it's very difficult. But anyway, I hope that this is enough, this prediction here for this World Series, and that you don't have to wait another 3 years for you to finally accept the truth, which is that God is real and there is a hell and you are going there. Because, why? Because God is good and justice is required. Sin must be paid for. Otherwise, God wouldn't be a good God. And no, you can't counterbalance your good deeds with bad deeds. If you are a Muslim or a Catholic, for example, believing that. You cannot go to a judge and say, yeah, I committed the crime, it's true, but, I did all of these good things. Please let me go. It doesn't work like that. And if it did, the judge would be corrupt. Well, why would it work like that for God? It doesn't. You need to be forgiven completely. Fortunately, you can be forgiven, because the price has been paid. The ransom owed to the devil, who has power over this world, and his power is death, that's been paid. The first man has become immortal. He's conquered death, and we can now conquer death through him, through his Spirit, his Holy Spirit. We can choose to follow him out of the jail that is this world that ends with the wages of sin being paid with death, and then torture in the afterlife. Until one of two things: either the individual dies the second death, which is described in the Bible, and then no longer exists, contrary to what many Christians will tell you, but they are not correct, and you are not incorrect for believing that as a case or a reason for not believing the God of the Bible, but it's not true. That's the problem. You didn't bother to look for yourself. Instead, you believed these Christians that told you that, and then concluded, well, that's not for me. It can't be true. You've only got yourself to blame. You shouldn't have trusted the word of these Christians, so-called. And then there's another camp, which is the majority of people, actually, who didn't get a fair opportunity to hear the gospel in their lifetime. They may have even lived before Christ, or they lived in a country where barely news has reached them. There's really not too much excuse, because everyone knows the year is 2025, and well, why is that? Well, because of Christ. And it's simple, whether you were even living in a Sharia law Muslim country, you can get on the internet and type in evidence for Christ. But God is extremely merciful, and there will be a second chance for many people, because Jesus will visit them in the grave and preach the gospel, and they will have an opportunity there to accept Christ. But it won't be fun for them. But if you are in the West and you've had all of the opportunity and you know full well the gospel, and you know and you've rejected Jesus, I'm not God, I don't make the decision, right? But don't count on you getting a second chance, is what I'm saying. Hell is filled with two types of people: the unrighteous and the self-righteous. Yeah, there are many people that think that they are a good person. But like I said, everyone's committed sin, and you can't get off saying, well, I did these good things, but, so let me go. Doesn't work. Every sin must be paid for unless you ask for forgiveness through Jesus, who has paid the price. And that's the third. There's three groups of people. The third will pass from life to life and not visit Sheol. And everyone's visit into Sheol is a different place depending on the individual, right? But it won't be pleasant for any of them. There will be different degrees of unpleasantness, though. Okay, so we summed it up here. The Blue Jays and this World Series is amazing. And we've got the Antichrist's birthday connecting to the bird strike, plane crash, through Dave Winfield, and the bird strike back in 1983. Can you believe that? Yeah. Well, there's more here. There's more. Stay tuned. Paul Simon is known to be an avid Yankees baseball fan. It is predicted that Paul Simon will slip and fall and hit his head on October 31st, 2025, 2 days after the Blue Jays' predicted World Series win, which is predicted to be 22 days after the prophetic Blue Jays-Yankees game on October 7th, which is how this video started, if you recall. It started with this prophetic Blue Jays game, which is, as I said, revealed to me that the Blue Jays would win this World Series this year. Their third World Series, it was Game 3 with the Yankees. Anyway, Paul Simon is a Yankees fan, And we have a 22 days and 2 days connection, which now you know is very, very relevant. I am predicting that there will be a no-hitter pitched in this year's World Series. In World Series history, there have only been 2 no-hitters pitched. The last one was pitched on the date 11-2 in 2022, and 11 times 2 equals 22. This is because 2 plus 2 seasons ago, 2 Milwaukee Brewers pitchers pitched a combined no-hitter for the Brewers' second no-hitter in franchise history. This was in 2021, the year of the record number of no-hitters pitched in a season. This year's season was remarkable in that there was 0 no-hitters pitched, and this was the first time this has happened in 20 years. The Milwaukee Brewers' second no-hitter that was pitched by 2 pitchers 2 plus 2 years ago was on the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And on this day, the Toronto Blue Jays scored a remarkable 22 runs in their 2 games that day. The following day was the Blue Jays scored another 22 runs. This is why it is predicted that there will be a no-hitter pitched in this year's World Series. Yeah, I wonder if it'll even be in Game 5, but that's not necessary in any way. Could be any of the 5 games. It might not even be 5 games. Like I said at the beginning, Game 5 could just be a day for prophetic signs that will still point to 144 weeks into the future. Maybe there will be something with the Blue Jays to hint at a bird strike, which would therefore mean the odds of the Brewers winning the World Series would increase, actually. Because one of the big reasons for believing the Blue Jays will win the World Series is because of the 144 weeks connection to the bird strike. But let's just say, for example, the 2 Blue Jays outfielders collide with each other in the outfield chasing a ball. That would be a bird strike, right? And maybe one gets a concussion, which would hint at Paul Simon's concussion 2 days later. Maybe there'll be a concussion in the game. Maybe it won't be the day the Jays win the World Series. Interesting. Well, anyway, we'll see what happens. Hopefully it'll be the case that the Jays win in Game 5 because I can't make another video predicting different things. We got to go with one of them and hope that it happens for the sake of the gospel so that people see how amazing the prediction was. So we got to go with what you think is the most likely. But you know what? I hadn't thought about it. Maybe there will be like a collision in the outfield between the 2 outfielders. Because, Paul Simon sang about Joe DiMaggio in Yankee Stadium, in the field, speaking of Dave Winfield. In the field, which is, by the way, where the plane is predicted to crash. It's predicted to crash into the outfield of the baseball stadium in St. Louis. Well, anyway, Paul Simon sang in the outfield of Yankee Stadium after Joe DiMaggio died. And Joe DiMaggio was known for colliding with a player and getting a concussion when he was chasing a ball. Now, there's connections to all of that, which I forget. But given this, and given the timing of the predicted concussion of Paul Simon, maybe that's what's going to happen, actually, on October 29th. Maybe it'll be not a win, or maybe it'll be both, but maybe it'll be a collision between 2 Blue Jays in the outfield, as in a bird strike. 2 Blue Jays, 2 days before Paul Simon's predicted to get a concussion. I'm thinking of this all as I'm speaking, by the way. It appears now that I need to change the beginning of this video to include this, actually. Wow. Okay, yes, wow. And if 2 Blue Jays collide in the outfield 2 days before Paul Simon, It'll also be 22 games, or 22 days after October 7th, the prophetic Blue Jays game. Wow. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to have to change the beginning of this video, and maybe this is actually more likely than the Toronto Blue Jays winning in 5 games. I don't know. Last paragraph here. The prophetic 3-run home run in Game 3 of the Toronto Blue Jays' series hinted at the 3rd World Series win this year. Okay? It hints at how they will win a 3rd World Series. Their first since '93. The following year, there was no World Series. It was a blackout. The coming solar flare from the sun, that is 93 million miles away, will cause a catastrophic blackout. This was written, as it says here, 2 hours ago. This was realized in the beginning of this video. And then I wrote this paragraph after I started recording this video. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.